Good evening. This is Thursday, January 14th at 5:01, and this is a meeting of the Civilian Police Oversight Agency Board. I'd like to welcome all of you and call this meeting to order. In response to the Governor's declaration of a public health emergency, which bans large public gatherings, we will be meeting by Zoom, and this meeting can be viewed over GovTV or GovTV on YouTube. And the recording of this meeting will be available on the CPOA website as well. So with that, I'd like to recognize we have a quorum. We have four members present. Member Galloway, Member Olivas, Member Mitchell. I'm sorry, we have five members present. No, we have four members present, and myself, Bill Cass. So that's, I believe I've caught all of the CPOA, or the board. The CPOA president is Director Ed Harness, Katrina Segala, Valerie Barella, and that's all I see. We also have our legal counsel present, Tina Gooch. From APD, we have, let's see, I believe you're acting Commander Sean Frick, is that right?
Yes, sir, correct. Yeah.
And Commander Zach Cottrell. All right, so have I missed anyone? Oh, and Pastor David
Walker.
Walker, thank you. I won't make that mistake again. So,
good evening, everyone.
And from from the city, we have Chris Sylvan, who I believe represents the Public Safety Committee. So. And from City Legal, I see Attorney Lindsay Van Meter, and also Attorney Melissa Kuntz from the city. So with that, we are at item 2, our mission statement, which is advancing constitutional policing and accountability for APD in the Albuquerque community. Item 3, approval of the agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda, and we have to do this by roll call vote according to the Zoom instructions. So
motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All right, so Member Galloway.
Yes.
Member Mitchell.
Yes.
Member Olivas.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So the agenda is approved, and we're now at item 4, public comment. We've received one public comment from Geraldine Amata. This has been circulated to the board and will not be read out loud, but the board can review those offline. So item 5, we're review and approval of the minutes from December 10th, 2020. These minutes have been circulated in advance of the meeting, and so if there is no objection, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of approving the minute? Member Galloway?
Yes.
Member Mitchell?
Yes.
Member Olivas?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So the minutes are from December 10th are approved unanimously. Reports from City Department. So item 6. So we are at APD, and we have acknowledge that we received 2 reports, one from IA Division Statistical Data and IA Professional Standards. So which of you gentlemen would like to go first?
I think I went first last month, Sean, so you can go first.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair's fair. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, I'm Acting Commander Sean Frick with the Internal Affairs Force Division. I'll cover our monthly force update for the month of December 2020. We had a grand total citywide of 67 force events for the month of December. The area commands, the top 2 were Valley and Southeast area commands, each has 17. Northeast was behind that with 12 force events over the year. When you average out per 1,000 calls per service, Valley was a little bit higher than the rest at 2.5 force events per 1,000 calls, whereas the remaining area commands hover typically right around where you see is about 1.5 to 2 force events per 1,000 calls. Of those force events, Valley had 3 level 3s, 6 level 2s, and 1 level 1. Southeast had 1 level 3, 12 level 2s, and then 4 level 1 uses of force. I'll just cover the top 2 unless anybody has questions about any of the other commands. Call types that result in force, as is common for nearly every month we see. The highest is our family dispute calls, resulting in a force event, with 10 total being the result of a family dispute, followed by an aggravated assault battery call at 7. And then we had 6 SWAT activations that resulted in force. So that's the month of December in a nutshell, and I'm open to any questions if the board has any.
I have a question for you, Commander. On the family dispute numbers, is that typically intoxication? Is there intoxication involved with those?
Quantitatively, I can't really say. Qualitatively, I would say yes. And I think that's why we see family disputes usually being near the top of our list for force events. Oftentimes, those involve intoxication, either drugs or alcohol. And then the police are being called because of a violent, tense situation. When we arrive, we encounter people who are still very amped up and under a lot of stress. So that's often when we see it. Analyzing a little bit further than that and seeing, we collect data on if people are in the influence of drugs or alcohol. I don't have that on this report. We would have to analyze that further for me to get a hard answer.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? I have one if no other board member has one yet. I'm curious, what's the difference between suspicious person, and I think it's vehicle, must be vehicle, and on-site suspicious versus suspicious person vehicle?
Sure, absolutely. So the suspicious person vehicle is when officers are dispatched to calls for service. So a citizen calls in a suspicious person or car naturally. The officers then dispatched to investigate that call. And on-site is a self-initiated activity. So the officer just on regular patrol sees something that's out of the ordinary, and then they stop that person to investigate further. So that's the difference between the two.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the last, about on-site?
On-site it's a self-initiated activity. So there'll just be like an officer on patrol, sees a suspicious car and then stops it.
Okay.
Would be that.
Oh, thank you. I understand now. Thank you.
Absolutely. Sure thing.
Any other questions for Acting Commander Frick? If not, thank you. I appreciate your report, and we'll go to Commander Cottrell.
Good evening, Dr. Cass and board members. I distributed our IA Professional Standards Report for the month of December 2020. In it, we did finish and close out a total of 13 cases where up through the discipline process and the cases are finalized. There were 11 cases that we did complete the investigation on, that we did send out for the chain of command review to review and issue discipline if necessary. In the month of December, we did open an additional 20 cases in internal affairs and sent 54 cases, which are minor misconduct cases, out to the area commands for their review and discipline recommendations. We did carry over 21 cases this month. Down below, I tried to make some changes to the report for you guys this month to add a little more information than what has been given in the past months. In the past months, we were just giving the cases that had discipline and that's it. These cases, I actually gave all the information on every single case that was closed out, up to including the SOP violation all the way down to the subsection and the general name of that subsection. On some of the cases that were closed out, where there were several different officers, I grouped the officers' SOP violations together. So in some cases, as you scroll down, there are spaces in between different SOP violations, and that's going to indicate there were multiple officers on that investigation. So if you scroll down, especially to I-373-20, that one's going to have, I think it had 13 or 14 officers involved in that one. So you'll see that I tried to group every single officer together for what was sustained or not sustained and the discipline that was issued on each officer for that case. And if there's any more information you guys would like to see in the months upcoming, please let me know and I can work it into this report just so you guys are getting the information that you would like to see. And any questions?
I have a question. I'm not sure you'd be prepared to answer this, but in terms of the number of complaints that you're getting or the number of investigations, how does that stack up in relation to comparable sized police departments? I don't really have a frame of reference to know, is that a lot, or is that would be something that would be considered normal? Or
You know, I honestly don't know. I can tell you that when you compare us to last year, we're going to show higher complaints just because our reporting process has changed in about the last year and a half. We made changes to that reporting process where every single policy violation has to be reported through us in IA now within 24 hours. Once we've instituted that, we noticed a sharp rise in the reporting and the policy violations. I think that's a testament to our new policy on that. It shows that it is working, that we do have supervisors and other officers that are reporting policy violations, even if they are small, minute ones. We are doing more internal audits that are resulting in more policy violations, such as monthly scorecard, checking to make sure that officers are uploading their cameras within the subsequent shift like they're supposed to, making sure that criminal complaints are getting signed immediately like they're supposed to. So we get a lot of cases off those monthly audits as well, which shows that we're trying to catch a lot of these smaller problems before they become bigger problems. But to fully answer your question, I don't know. I can actually get with some other police departments and get that information for you in the next couple months, sir.
I think it would be helpful to have a frame of reference, to just see how we stack up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Commander? Is it Cottrell or Cottrell?
The rest of the country says Cottrell, but for some odd reason, my family says Cottrell. So I'll take whatever I can get, sir.
All right. Okay. Thank you. I have a question, and that is, can you divulge any information, or how much information can you tell us about this incident that you pointed out, where there's a fair number of officers involved in this situation? I mean, what kind of a situation leads to that widespread disciplinary action?
That was a case that actually resulted in failure to supervise. If you look at the SOP violations, most of those are going to result in supervisors that failed to follow a special order. That special order requires supervisors to place officers on a lineup daily. That was not done in this case systemically, as we found. I think 10 of those 13 officers involved in that case were sergeants and lieutenants. So that's where most of that came from on that case.
Thank you. I also noticed that there were quite an increase from, say, last month. I mean, I believe there were 3 cases of discipline action. And is there any particular reason that it's increased this month? I didn't do a comprehensive comparison, so I don't know if this is a trend or not. But
no, some of that's going to be due to the information that I'm including in the report. So I'm trying to include every single case that was closed out, not just the cases that resulted in discipline. But we did close out more cases this month than we normally do. 13 is actually a little high. Usually we close out about 10 cases a month is kind of our average to go through the discipline process.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Commander Cottrell? So,
Dr. Cass,
yes.
if I might add, as a community liaison officer for the City of Albuquerque Police Department, I just wanted to add tonight that since I've been appointed this position as the community outreach liaison, that I've observed that this administration is positively moving forward. In compliance with the DOJ training, development, and curriculum, I've noticed that APD continues to offer professional training to its recruits, as well as all of his sworn officers in every area ranging from the use of force to firearms, as well as defensive tactics to de-escalation. To ensure that the reform process gets back on track, I've noticed that this administration in the Albuquerque Police Department commits to continue working with the COPA as well as each CPC to realize that it takes all of us to accomplish the goals and bring about the necessary reforms that is required of us. In regards to the chief of police, I just want to share with you all, and some of you may already be aware, but the chief of staff, Mike Pulley, as well as Alicia Manzano and contractor Herb Cosley, have been briefing the community policing councils about the ongoing search of the police chief of Albuquerque, New Mexico. They've been providing information regarding community input, the results of the community survey, as well as the status of the search, and taking feedback regarding the CPC members' priorities and questions for the candidates. 3 PCCs have already been briefed thus far, and they will attend the next 3 PC meetings scheduled for later this week. In regards to the community outreach, the Albuquerque Police Department and the Crime Stoppers held their 26th annual Cops for Kids on December the 15th, which is in conjunction with the community engagement of the department into the community of Albuquerque. Due to the COVID, this year's Cop for Kids event had to be held in a different way to keep everyone safe. Volunteers from the Crime Stoppers and the Albuquerque Police Department chaplains, they gathered gifts, wrapped them, ready to go for officers to pick up, and those officers delivered them directly to the homes of 100 families here and throughout the city of Albuquerque. The downtown officers helped, again, a part of the community engagement. The downtown officers helped the homeless community during the holiday week. They provided resources and gave access to resources like heading home. They also were able to give gifts with clean clothes to those that was homeless. The officers even made a sweater out of a sock for a cold 7-week-old puppy. So you can see that the active Albuquerque Police Department, as well as this administration, is doing whatever we can, because we realize that it takes all of us, and we are committed to continue working with the COPA as well as the citizens police community. Any questions?
Thank you for that. We will have to create a spot on the agenda for you.
Okay. Well, I was told the last time to be ready.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Bill, I have one more question.
Yes, go ahead.
On these written reprimands and some of these low-level suspensions, do the officers have a mechanism for having those removed from their personnel files after a certain period of time, or?
They do, sir. And that applies to our collective bargaining agreement. After a year, a written reprimand or verbal reprimand cannot be held against the officer for progressive discipline. So they do kind of expire at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So if there are no further questions for our APD representatives, you're free to stay or free to leave, whichever you choose. And we thank you for your reports.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cass.
So moving on, we're at item B, 6B, report from City Council. Is there anyone from representing City Council here today?
Chair Dr. Cass, I'll take that.
Mr. Sylvan, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, board members. Chris Sylvan with the City Council and Office of Neighborhood Coordination. The only report I have to give tonight is we still have our one applicant that is making meetings with the counselors, And we also have another applicant that's going to be doing the same as well. I am told by February something should be on the council committee agenda, which would go to the Public Safety Committee meeting and possibly for immediate action to go to council. So with that, I stand for questions.
Are there any questions from the board for Chris Sylvan? I don't see any. Going once, going twice. I don't see any questions, so thank you very much. Let's see, if you are you planning, we could rearrange this agenda, but are you planning to speak on represent any other group tonight?
Chair Cass and board members, yes. The Public Safety Committee meeting, but if Lindsay's ready to go, if she's next, she can go ahead and I'll speak later.
Okay, thank you. All right. So we're down to the mayor's office, I believe. And so is there someone representing the mayor's office?
Good afternoon. I believe that Pastor Walker actually was the representative from the mayor's office. So I believe we've got it covered already. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. So, okay. So go ahead. The city attorney, I presume, is who you're speaking for.
Yes. Thank you, Chair Dr. Cass. At the last meeting, we discussed the issue of the city's efforts to get you additional documents post FRB for your review. And I do have an update to provide to you. Previously, the FRB documentation that was provided, I understand, was a PowerPoint, the minutes, and some limited OBRD videos. What we are going to do, and I am going to have to beg your patience with us because of the amount of work that this takes, but we are going to provide, in essence, all of the documents provided to FRB, but what that requires to be able to get that to the CPOAB is for substantial redaction to meet the requirements of the collective bargaining agreement and the ordinance. So we will be redacting officers' names and personal identifying information from all of the reports and additional requirements as set forth in the CBA. So what does this mean for the particular case that you have already requested? The city is working, and APD is working to get that to you. We don't have an exact expected date due to the length of the redactions and the fact that there were some staffing issues to provide staff to do that, but we're working through those for you. We are going to do our best as we move forward into the next monitoring period to begin to be able to provide all of those documents to you within the deadlines required by the CASA and the policies. So are there any questions about that matter?
Member Olivas.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for bringing that update and several of my comments. In fact, basically my only comments on the cases that we're going to review tonight was with regards to serious use of force, basically have to do with the amount of information we're given being too limited. So I think that'll improve things going forward. So I appreciate that.
Other questions? If not, I have one, and that is, in downloading cases or PowerPoint cases that we're going to review tonight, I noticed that there have been a number, about 8 or 10 cases that were in other folders or in related folders that appear to be new cases, and they just contain the PowerPoint information. So is that, I mean, I guess my question is, what basically should we do with those cases, or do we need to go through the same process, or is this going to be a method? I mean, it sounds like this won't be the normal method of delivery, because these are cases that were, a link was provided by IA, and it was strictly just a PowerPoint link, which is what we've been getting. So, how does this fit in with what you're going to do in the future?
Sure. I think for now, if you need the additional documents, it makes sense for you to do what you've done in the last meeting, which was to vote to receive the additional documents. Since we've already sent this to you, and we'll work on getting those to you as well. Unless if you believe there's a different, better process, I'm absolutely willing to work with you all on that.
Well, I think, and this is a situation where we probably don't need all the documents for every case, but we don't know what we are missing until we start to review a case and we find out that it's just not possible to come to a reasonable conclusion based upon the information we have. So, going forward, I mean, we can have further discussion about this when we get to reviewing our cases tonight. But I think it's possible that we could continue the process, and when we select cases for the next meeting to review, and if we find cases that are lacking information, we just have to make the request at that time. So. I mean, I think there's some cases that are certainly, complete enough to make a judgment, but not all are. So we'll, if we can continue to work through this, I think that'll, I think the board's willing to cooperate in that. So.
Thank you, Chair Dr. Cass. And I failed to mention one other point, which is if any member of the board in the meantime wishes to view the documents, there's still the opportunity to work with IAFD to either go to APD to review the documents, or Lieutenant Stephanie Smith is the individual in charge of getting these documents to you, and she may be able to work something out with you over Zoom. So I will put her email address into the chat for you to do that, as if that's the way the board wishes to proceed. And then the only other item I have to provide for an update is that it does look like we will be scheduled for a hearing with Judge Brack on February 3rd. And we're all hoping that what we will be able to do at that hearing is address a stipulated order, as we discussed in the last hearing. And with that, I stand for any other questions.
Any other questions from the board for Ms. Van Beener? I see none, so I thank you for your report, and you're free to go if you like. So thanks again.
Thank you, Chair Dr. Cass.
Okay, we are at a report from the CPCs. Is there anyone from who's reporting on behalf of the CPCs?
Good evening, Chair Cass, Honorable Board. I'll take this one for the very last time. Now that we have our CPC liaison, Kelly Mensa, who you can see here. Just briefly, Kelly started the first week of January, and he's been immersed in CPCs. There was a meeting right away the first Thursday after he started, and they've all been consistent meetings with the introduction of the search for the chief, and then compliance is doing an IMR 12 update. But going back to Kelly, and I don't want to talk about him like he's not here, but anyway, he's made a career for the last 25 years in various aspects of business communications and facilitation. He earned a bachelor's degree from Eastern New Mexico in journalism, worked in fields of print, radio, television, online journalism, covering various facets of news. From 2009 to 2011, he worked as a media specialist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and was tasked with facilitating public outreach on American Recovery and Reinvestment Act projects with the service. Over a four Southwestern state region. He's also been a career consultant for Intel, the state of New Mexico, the U.S. Army, and has been stationed at bases in New Mexico, Texas, and Kuwait. He also has a bachelor's degree in business entrepreneurship from Western Carolina University, and we're happy to have him on board and trying not to overwhelm him with all the stuff from all 6 CPCs all at the same time. And so with that, I'll just let Kelly address you a little bit. And then if you have any questions for him or myself, we stand for questions.
Well, thank you for the introduction, Ed. I'm pleased to be here, and I'm still learning as to how all the parts fit. If you have any information for me, anything you might find pertinent that I can use that we can go forward with, I'll leave my phone number and also email in the chat. Basically, I am trying to figure out what the priorities would be and how the CPOA and the CPC are going to work together most effectively. So I've been on the phone with a couple of the CPC chairs this week and also many other officials. And I think by next week, in about 2 weeks or so, I'll have a better idea of what to say when I address this board and address the others. So at this point, it's still a little fuzzy, but I'm getting there. So with that, I guess we'll just go back to the meeting. Any questions right now?
Yeah, are there any questions for Mr. Mensah? So, well, I would welcome you to the CPOA CPC family, if I can use that term without offending anybody here. So we're happy to have you, and you sound like you have your work cut out for you, but it sounds also like you're prepared. So I'm looking forward to the interaction. So
thank you very much.
Any other questions? Any comments? All right. So thank you again. And moving on, we are at the APOA. So is there a representative from the Albuquerque Police Officers Association here? Seeing none, we are back to Mr. Silva in the Public Safety Committee.
Thank you, Chair Dr. Cass, board members, Chris Sylvan, City Council. Here's the Public Safety Report. The Public Safety Committee met on December 15th, and at that meeting, they looked at OC 20-18, and that's the semi-annual reports from the CPOA, and that was received be noted by all 5 counselors. And the other item that was on the second item that was on there was OC 20-19, and that's the CPOA board policies and procedures. OC, and that was 5-0, receipt be noted. Both of these will be heard at the January 20th City Council meeting. The meeting has been moved from its normal Monday day to Wednesday because of the holiday. Also on that same agenda was R20-123, which is setting the policy for interim appointees for the Albuquerque Police Chiefs Department. That one was moved to January 12th Public Safety meeting, which was this past Tuesday. So at this past Tuesday's meeting, Councilor Bassan decided that R-20-123 just be moved to council with no recommendation, because she just wanted to hear the full council hear the bill. So with that, that's all I have for my report, and I stand for any questions.
I'm sorry, any questions for Chris Sylvan? Okay, thank you, and we appreciate your report, and you're free to stay or free to go, whichever you prefer. So,
okay, thank you, Chair Dr. Cass, board members.
All right, so we are at the CPOA report. Mr. Harness.
Chair Dr. Cass, honorable board, good evening. I'll start backwards, essentially. When we set up the agenda, we thought that Pastor Walker would be reporting for the city. So we'll get that coordinated with him. Not that it really matters as far as the reporting, but we envisioned that he would be reporting for the mayor's office. So that's why we didn't carve out a different agenda item for his report. You've received the transcript from the status conference from Elizabeth Martinez, so that has been sent to you via email. The investigator position has been posted on the city's website for the job. We'll be hoping to fill 3 investigator positions from that posting. It should be up for another week. We will be joining City Legal's request for proposals for a vendor for outside investigators as well to help with caseload. The subpoena in the Clifton White case has met some resistance. We were promised to have some documents delivered to us by the 8th of January. We have not received those documents, nor are they willing to make the agents available to us at this point. So I will be in consultation with Attorney Cooch as to how we're going to move forward with that subpoena enforcement. Over the next couple of months, the investigators in the agency will be attending a DAGO investigation into public internal affairs training. A newer investigator, he'll go through the initial internal affairs training. The more experienced investigators that have already taken that training will be taking the advanced training. And that will be over a series of weeks, 1 day a week, full day. And it will be done by the end of February. I think it's 5 sessions and then an examination for the certification. So that will be ongoing. Starting in February, the complainants who are going to be having their cases heard will be receiving either an email or a letter, if available, if their address is available or email is available, informing them that their case is going to be heard at the February meeting, and that they need to contact me so that I can get them a Zoom invite so that if they choose to appear to address you, they can do so. That notice will go out when I upload the cases into the SmartLink for your review. The findings form letter is in final development. It is being turned into a loadable PDF form. And the office will be closed next Monday to commemorate Dr. King's birthday. In lieu of raises this year, the city has given us 2 extra paid holidays. So one of the holidays is MLK Jr.'s birthday. So we will be closed on Monday. Other than that, I stand, sit, I'm available for questions.
Any questions? Member Olivas?
Just a thank you for that update, and I think that those changes that you're going to be making are I'll reserve judgment as to whether they'll be an improvement, but I think they'll be an improvement. So I appreciate you working on that, and we'll work together if they need refinement or anything like that. But we appreciate you updating us on that.
Any other questions for Director Harness? Seeing no other questions, we will move on to item 7, which is hearing on requests for reconsiderations. We have none for this meeting, and so we will move to item 8, which is review of cases, and starting with administratively closed cases. So if we can have we talked about how we were going to present serious use of force, but if how would we like to present these administratively closed cases? Do we can have a motion to accept these administratively closed cases as a group and go from, and then if there are objections, we can get some further explanation. So do I hear a motion to accept these administratively closed cases?
Motion to accept the administratively closed cases.
And a second?
Second.
All right, and all in favor? Or-
I have a question.
I'm sorry, we need discussion, so I'm sorry. So, Member Mitchell.
I have a question on 30220 about the complaint about the body not being covered in the street. And I was wondering, that seems like a pretty easy policy adjustment for APD to do. Is there any additional information on that in terms of maybe getting them to consider providing materials to do that for the officers when they come upon that situation?
Chair, Dr. Cass, Member Mitchell, I think that there is APD policy that could be improved. They do have the blankets which don't transfer evidence available for covering. But I have had discussions with the Office of Medical Investigator that asks that the bodies not be covered until they're done with their investigation. So unless the OMI has changed their policy, APD is directed to not cover the body until the OMI is done with its investigation. Now, whether or not there's a way to set up some barriers to be more sensitive to the public during these kinds of situations, that's probably something that could be explored.
Yeah, I saw where they said they try to position the vehicles to block and different things like that. But it seems like there should be a way to be respectful of the victim. And also, you know, there could be occasions where family members show up there or are actually already there. And it just seems like to me it'd be a good thing to be able to do something in that regard. So that's all I have on that one. Thank you.
Member Galloway.
Ed, during one of the NACOL conference sessions, there was an oversight agency that had tackled that very issue. And I'd have to go back and dig through my notes to find out. But were you a part of that particular, did you listen into that particular session? Because maybe we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Chair
Okay.
Dr. Cass, Member Galloway, no, I don't recall being a part of that presentation. I just know that I've had that discussion with OMI, the Office of OMI at shooting scenes.
Yeah,
so-
I'm just wondering if they may have uncovered anything, because it was a collaboration with victims' families, if I remember correctly. So maybe we can just talk to them and see if there was anything. I understand what you're saying about OMI, but it's an interesting point for sure. And maybe there was some kind of something else that didn't require a blanket over a body or something that they developed that we might be able to recommend.
I have another question on 30120, which was basically a complaint against BCSO. Director Harness, when we get those complaints, and I've seen a few of them come through where we're not the board that would review that for that different agency. Do those get forwarded on to the agency, the appropriate agency, for their consideration, or does it just stop with us?
Chair Dr. Cass, Member Mitchell, typically in those situations, we will advise the complainant where to file, but we would not pass that on along as a in the course of business. That would be something, I believe the letters, for BCSO, we give them the information for BCSO's internal affairs as to where to file that type of complaint.
All right, thank you.
Any other Any other questions regarding these administratively closed cases or any other discussion? Seeing no further discussion, there's a motion on the floor to accept these administratively closed cases as presented. So I will call for a roll call vote. Member Galloway.
Yes.
Member Mitchell.
Yes.
Member Olivas.
Yes.
The chair votes yes. So the administratively closed cases are accepted as presented with these comments noted, and unanimously, by the way. And so we will move on to item B, which is unfounded cases. So we have 4 unfounded cases which are listed in the agenda, and I would entertain a motion to accept these unfounded cases so that we can commence discussion. So
Motion to accept the unfounded cases.
second?
Second.
All right, so any discussion about these unfounded cases? So if in the interest of full disclosure, I would just note that I know the family identified in case 220-20, but I don't believe it has any impact on the case itself, so, or the findings. But so if there's no further discussion, I would call for a roll call vote to accept the unfounded cases as presented. So in favor of accepting the cases, Member Galloway.
Yes.
Member Mitchell.
Yes.
Member Olivas.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So the unfounded cases have been accepted as presented. So item C, under review of cases, is unfounded and exonerated. We have 2 cases there, and I would entertain a motion to accept those 2 cases as so that we can commence discussion. So
moved.
we have a second?
Second.
All right, so any discussion about unfounded and exonerated cases 222-20 and 223-20? Seeing no discussion, I will have a roll call vote to accept unfounded and exonerated cases 222-20 and 223-20. So, Member Galloway.
Yes.
Member Mitchell.
Yes.
Member Olivas.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So those cases are accepted as unanimously. So we are now at serious use of force cases and officer-involved shootings. And we have 4 cases on the agenda tonight, and so we can proceed through these cases one by one, and so we will start with serious use of force case 19-007-0442. So I would ask Director Harness to give us a synopsis of this case before we start discussion.
Chair, Dr. Cass, board, this case, IAFD case C 2019-00068 occurred August 2nd, Friday, 2019 at around 9:30 in the morning. Officers were sent to the park for someone camping in the park, which is a violation. They came across the subject and his tent, and then identified that he was wanted on a warrant. Prior to him being handcuffed, he attempted to flee, and Officer 1 used an electronic control weapon to apprehend the subject. And so this is under the old policy, so that's why it came to be a serious use of force, because of the use of the electronic control weapon and the fact that it cycled 3 times.
Is there any discussion of this case? So, do I have a, seeing no discussion, do we have a motion to accept this case as presented? I could, I would ask, Director Harness, I would ask would you please give us your opinion about this?
I'm sorry. Yes, Chair Dr. Cass. This obviously I've reviewed this case before at the Force Review Board, and at the Force Review Board, I believed that the use of the electronic control weapon was there was a violation of policy because the officer failed to warn the subject that he was going to be tased prior to the activation of the weapon. Given the amount of officers that were on the scene, I did not believe that I didn't accept the argument that it wasn't feasible to warn the subject prior to tasing him. So I believe that there's a sustained violation of the electronic control weapon policy in this case.
Is there any board comment? Under the new policy, how would this have been treated? Or classified, I guess. Maybe that's the...
Chair, Dr. Cass, I think this would be a level 2 now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So is there any, all right, so is there any discussion, any further discussion? And what I would call for is a roll call to...
Dr. Cass?
Motion, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Who motioned to in second?
Yes, I'm sorry. So I would like a motion to accept the judgment or the findings of Director Harness in this matter, and if so, is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. So is there any discussion of these findings as presented by Director Harness?
So this is to offer a dissent to the findings of the Force Review Board that this was in fact a sustained policy violation by not warning this individual.
I believe that's the case, yes.
Yes, Chair Dr. Cass, Member Olivas, it would be a violation of the ECW policy, which states that an officer must warn prior to activating, warn the subject that if there's no compliance with the order, that they will be tased. Not simply warning other officers that the taser is being activated. That's a separate training warning as opposed to the duty to warn someone that they're going to be tased prior to the activation of the electronic.
Director Harness, is that mitigated at all when the alleged offender is running away?
Chair Dr. Cass, Member Mitchell, the language is the out for not warning is if feasible, and my evaluation that it was feasible in this case to warn. The flight aspect of it isn't a part of this particular case for not warning, in my judgment.
Any other questions? So seeing no further questions or discussion, I would call for a vote to accept the judgment or the opinion of Director Harness in this matter, where he's found that this would be a out of policy violation based on the fact that no warning was given where it was feasible. So in favor of accepting Director Harness's recommendation, call for a roll call vote. Member Galloway.
Yes.
Member Mitchell,
Yes.
Member Olivas,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So the findings by the director are accepted. All right, moving on to unanimously. Moving on to case number 19-0075407. So, Director Harness, would you give us a synopsis of this case, please?
Chair, Dr. Cass, board, yes, this was a tactical activation, although that's not readily apparent from the presentation that you were given. I did go back and look at what the tactical activation was for, and it was for a barricaded subject, the subject of the force in this case. He had a warrant for aggravated battery on a police officer, and he had a history of violence against police officers and fleeing. So a tactical activation commenced in order to get him out of the dwelling where he was. ECIT was on scene. They used a bunch of chemical weapons. And then when he did finally exit the dwelling, he was non-compliant. And so then there was a canine apprehension. And so that's why this case is before you, because of the canine apprehension.
Is there any comments, discussion from the board before we hear what the recommendation of the director is? And so, is there any comments? I have several which we may want to entertain.
I believe we need a point of order. I believe we need a motion before discussion.
All right, we can do that. So in order to have a motion, we need to decide what the, we need to have a motion as to what the decision of the director is. So,
Chair, Dr. Cass, I found that this force was within policy.
sorry. Is there a motion to accept?
I'd move to accept the findings of the director and the Force Review Board.
Second.
All right, now we can have discussion. So I will volunteer to go first, and that is that I think from what I saw of this, I was alerted to the, or I noticed that there was not much of a context for presenting this case, and it was, and I think it begs to get, you know, for us to be able to get more information about cases, which I believe is forthcoming now. So I think, though, given the explanation that we received, it's probably sufficient to make a judgment about the case. But in general, I have sort of objections to the way K9 seems to be used, even though, and I recognize that it is within the policy that exists and existed at the time and exists today. But we've been looking at K9 policy in the policy and subcommittee, and it's now under review in the PPRB and OPA process as well. And so I mean, this case just points out to me that I think there needs to be some changes in the K9 policy at APD. And I would, my feeling is that it's, from what I watched of the video in this case, the presence of a K9 just excited the situation, and I can see where someone who hears a dog barking and straining at the leash has kind of the innate sense that he ought to be walking away from the situation. And so I think that, you know, those are the considerations for how K9 policy might be used in the future. I agree that they don't really impact this case. But with that, having said that, I think it just points out the one more piece of evidence where K9 policy could be modified and improved. So, and I will advocate for that in the policy committee, and I think the policy committee at some point will bring this to the board as well. So, as the policy goes through the review process at APD. So that's all I had to say about the case. Any other? Yes, Member Galloway.
Director Harness, did you get to see more video? I understand from the notes in the presentation that the video that we were provided was the best available video on that particular case, but were you able to see anything? Because best available, though it may have been, it was kind of difficult to see what was going on in those moments.
Chair Dr. Cass, Member Galloway. There were other videos. I don't know that there was anything that would change my opinion from what you were provided. As far as what Attorney Van Meter pointed out to you that you're going to be receiving now is all of the investigative materials that go to the Force Review Board. So that would have been all of the videos associated with this particular activation.
What you saw, you felt comfortable enough coming to a determination.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, I do have one other comment. Yeah, were you, Member Mitchell, were you?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Director Harness. If I recall, didn't it say in the PowerPoint that the subject was going back into the apartment that they had been trying to get him out of when they let the dog go?
Chair Dr. Cass, Member Mitchell, yes, that was what they were trying to prevent, given that they were on scene with ECIT and using gas munitions to extract him. They thought that the best approach was to use the canine to prevent him to go back into the building or into the dwelling.
All right, thank you.
I did have another comment, and that is that recently, in fact, it was just on January 6th, there was a special order which was issued, which dealt with redefinition or some definition changes in SOP 253, which is the use of force policy, and it defines resistance levels, and it also talks about target glancing, and it suggests that it states that target glancing is not a reason for officers to suspect that to employ active resistance, or I'm sorry, to employ to act on basis of an anticipated action that they have seen what they think the subject or the person is about to engage in. And target glancing means that he's looking around for an escape or someone close by, I guess, to focus his attention on, and that's been used to justify using force. Now, this is a change in the policy, and it does not, again, it doesn't affect this particular case because it operated under a different policy where apparently target glancing was commonly used, or at least invoked as a reason to anticipate an action. So it's just another point that policies change, policies need review, and this is one that is clearly under review. Might also add that SOP 253, these changes through the executive order, did get some attention from the APOA and the media as well through that. So, in any case, are there any other questions regarding the recommendation of Director Harness? So, if seeing none, then we'll call for a vote to accept the recommendations. Member Galloway.
Yes.
Member Mitchell.
Yes.
Member Olivas.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So we accept the recommendations of the director unanimously. Moving on to case 19-008-9586. Director Harness.
Chair Dr. Cass, this case occurred, I don't know why I want to say it that way, the 28th of August in 2019 as well. The force case is 2019-83. This involved a canine apprehension, again, of a barricaded subject. Police were called to the scene with a woman who was hurling bottles and had been armed with a hammer and menacing children. And so this is before you because it was a canine apprehension as well. And I found the use to be in policy.
I'm sorry. Do we have a motion to accept the director's finding that this this use of force was within policy?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Discussion. I have the same comment that, or a similar comment to the use of a canine. I think there was a lot of effort done to resolve this situation in any other way, but ultimately, when the canine was deployed, the officer came into the apartment. The subject ran into the bedroom, and then the canine was released from one room into another room and was essentially out of sight briefly, maybe, I'm not quite sure how long, but was out of sight and out of control of the handler. And it sounds, it appears that this is a case of the way you determine that something has happened is you listen for the screams of the victim. And it seems like a really, there has to be a better way, in my view. And again, this is was within policy, and so I think what it begs for is looking at a change in the policy. So I that's all I really have to say about this. So is there any other comments, discussion before we vote on this case? All right, so I will call for a vote to approve or accept the findings of the director. Member Galloway.
Yes.
Member Mitchell.
Yes.
Member Olivas.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So the findings of the director are accepted unanimously. Okay. Case number 19-009-3619, Director Harness.
Chair Dr. Cass, this case occurred September 10th, 2019. Force case number 2019-84. This case involved an officer responding to a person who was down and out. He made contact with this individual. It was determined that he was going to arrest him, or detain him, I should say. And then while the subject was in handcuffs, he was taken down to the ground. So this is a serious use of force as defined then because of the takedown of the individual while in handcuffs. Just looking at, when you look at in this case, when you look at the on-body recording, it's hard to tell what the interaction is that spurs taking this individual to the ground. But then when you look at the surveillance tape from the store or the parts store, you can see where the subject attempts to headbutt the officer, and that's why he was taken to the ground. So I find this one to be in policy.
Do we have a motion to accept the findings of the director in this case?
So moved.
Second.
All right, discussion? Seeing no discussion, I would call for a vote to accept the findings in this case. Member Galloway.
Yes.
Member Mitchell,
Yes.
Member Olivas,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So the findings of the director in 19-009-3619 are accepted. So we have completed our serious use of force cases. I might mention that as I mentioned to Attorney Van Meter, there have been about 8 cases which have been, deposited into the link where we can, access the PowerPoint files and review the cases. And I would, like to get some kind of sentiment from the board, but my thinking right now is that I will, look at these cases and at least in enough detail to decide whether there's sufficient information to do a reasonable review with what we have, and then put them on the agenda. If you've got and then when we, in your own review, you can decide whether that works or not, and whether whether we should ask for more information from the board, or from APD, to get the complete case file. I mean, it's kind of a stopgap measure. If we're going to get the information in the future, what we have here is kind of a handful of cases that are 2 hands full of cases that we can at least consider for review. So I'm just like to get an idea from the board if you think that's a reasonable route to follow to get to continue to review these cases as we go along. Are there any comments? Any discussion?
Well, for me, I would like to just get the cases that we're going to review. I mean, we had a lot of cases to review this month with the citizen complaints. And so, in all honesty, I probably wouldn't be looking at anything that wasn't on the agenda. I would look at them ahead of time.
Well, what I propose is that I would at least take a look to see if I should put them on the agenda. Once I put them on the agenda, you'd be informed, and then you could, go to the PowerPoint presentation and review the case. And then, but it would just be the PowerPoint presentation because that's all we have for those cases
Right.
that are there. So, I mean, I think we've been successful about 90% of the time in having sufficient information. It's just that occasionally, and who knows how often it'll happen in the future, but we have cases that need more information. So, Member Galloway, you have a question, comment?
I think we've had enough of a delay on the use of force batch of cases as it is. If you feel like there's enough information to be heard, then I would be comfortable with you putting them on the agenda.
Okay, any Member Olivas, you have any? Yes.
Yes, Chair Cass, I wanted to offer a motion to reconsider my administratively closed motion to exclude 276-20, which was not reviewed by the board.
Fair, I would second that.
I'm trying to. So, from a parliamentary standpoint, I mean, we've gone past that. I'm trying to figure out how.
The case was listed on the agenda, but it was not reviewed by the board. So we just need to, for our internal tracking purposes and for the purpose of being accurate, remove that case from the motion so that it was not approved.
Okay. Yes. All right. I don't think that's that shouldn't be a problem. Let's just finish this business.
Is that a typo, Bill?
I'm sorry?
Is that a typo? Was that supposed to be 275-20?
No, it was it was added mistakenly.
Oh, okay. All right.
So can we just let's.
So point of order, we do have a motion in a second. If we could just deal with this, then that's dispensed with.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion and a second to remove 276-20 from the administratively closed case as that we earlier accepted.
Correct.
Because it was never it was not supposed to be considered here. It was added mistakenly. So, any discussion? All right, in favor of removing case 276-20 from administratively closed cases. Member Galloway,
Yes.
Member Mitchell,
Yes.
Member Olivas.
Yes.
Chair votes yes. So that's motion passed unanimously. So let's go back and finish up this discussion about the serious use of force cases. Member Galloway accepts the idea that I can put cases on the agenda that I think have enough information to give a fair review by the board. And I see Member Mitchell nodding his head, and so I don't see any negative reaction from Member Olivas, so I will make an executive decision to add these cases after some cursory review to see, to assure that there's some, reviewable information. So I don't believe that requires any action from the board. I just wanted to get the sentiment of the board for doing what I'm proposing. So we are done with serious use of force. And we are now at reports from subcommittees. So, Member Galloway, I believe this is item 10A, Community Outreach Subcommittee. Member Galloway, please.
So really everything that is of note was provided to you all as part of the board packets. The only thing that I would highlight is that if you all go to SharePoint, there is some materials available on onboarding of new board members. And what we would kind of like to do is get everybody's take on what your experience was like joining the board, a review of the materials that are in that file, and an opinion as to whether or not they need to be expanded on, maybe presented in a different way, things that would make transitioning onto this board easier, more palatable maybe, because there's always been discussion about it being a difficult process. So if you guys could take a look at that and provide feedback to me, that would be great. But other than that, any questions that anybody may have,
I did look at the folder that you suggested, and the only item I saw in that particular folder was the training template, I believe. I think there's a whole lot of materials in another folder that has a different name, and I'm wondering if that's the one you're referring to, because it has the training materials for new board members.
sorry. I'm trying to log into it so I can give you the exact name of the folder. Outreach board orientation expectations. These are the expectations. And then there is the information that's on the new board member orientation flash drive. So right. Probably those two things in conjunction.
Right.
Yeah.
And most of the information is in the new board member orientation, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So just if
I just wanted to be clear on where the information really was.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you guys have any opinions as to that experience, that would be helpful as we move forward.
Any other questions regarding the Member Galloway's report? All right. If seeing no other questions, we are item B, Policy and Procedure Review Subcommittee report. I submitted this in writing, and I can go through the highlights, and that is that we had there's been some new management on OPA, and Deputy Commander Sean Waite is the new APD person who heads up OPA, as well as several other divisions within APD that are related to compliance, and he's within the compliance division. I never know how to get the organization name right, but in any case, he attended our last policy and procedure meeting and expressed his immediate goals were to, shorten some of these SOP review timelines and focus. He says CASA policies are pretty much in compliance in terms of review, but non-CASA policies are lagging. And we also had some discussion about the revisions and review to SOP 352, which is the policy on policies, and that's going through the process right now, and they're answering questions from city legal. The other thing that other policy that I mentioned earlier is the canine policy, which is SOP 164, and the use of canine, which is SOP 223, and those are both in the process at different stages in being reviewed at OPA or PPRB. And those are also CASA policies, by the way. And these are I think this is where it's an opportune time for us to monitor those policies and make the recommendations that we see fit, based upon a lot of information which is coming out now about the use of canines. And I think, the Policy and Procedures Committee has been looking at that. The other thing which will come up later in business is that the Policy Committee was tasked with receiving recommended CASA changes from the board. We have received none, and so we are about to take this off of our off the table, and we'll talk about that more when we get to that item in the agenda. And then the other policy that has been lurking around is the overtime policy, and that's kind of gone to a higher level of scrutiny, I believe, as well. And we're waiting for some of that to come back before we take any more action on that at the Policy Committee. So with that, I'll stand for any questions. Our next meeting is February 4th. So, case review. Member Nixon is listed as this, but Member Galloway, you can't get off the hook so easily.
I can't. I'm the only one here, but it's easy. We didn't meet in December. We're planning to meet January 26th to review the cases that we selected last month for the audit. So there's no news, good news kind of here situation.
Any questions? Seeing no questions.
Chair,
yes.
Dr. Cass, just make sure, I'm just making sure that Member Galloway and Member Nixon saw that those cases have been uploaded already and they're there for review.
I can't speak for Eric or Tara, but I know that I've seen it, so.
All right, we are at Personnel Subcommittee, item D, Mr. Member Olivas.
Thank you, Dr. Cass. I did submit my report in writing. Our meeting date was on the 28th of December. We received a report from staff on the implementation of the 2020 evaluation. I did receive a more recent update yesterday from Amanda Bustos, our staff member, who's our point of contact for the Personnel Committee in distributing the surveys. We are still lagging a little bit in response. So I believe as of the time that I received the response from her, there was 3 out of 9 board members, 9 potential board members. Those include some of the retired board members. But if you haven't completed that survey, please do so as soon as possible. We were really hoping to wrap this up. I'd really like to wrap this up no later than next week. Staff responses are substantially higher than what we've got from the board right now. But Amanda did send a reminder to everyone who hadn't responded. So please, if you haven't, take the time to do it. I did it myself just a few days ago. Takes maybe, I would say 30 minutes tops if you know, to really read through it, think about it, enter your responses and enter comments too if you're so obliged. The committee also finalized its plans to meet with the Council of Chairs at its next meeting, which will be held on January 25th at 3 p.m. That'll be the main topic at that meeting, and we also hope to meet on the director's evaluation for 2020. Hopefully at that point we'll have that finalized, or we'll at least have the data collection finalized. We likely won't have the evaluation itself finalized. We received a report from the director on staffing and other requests that had been made by the board, and I think we refined that a bit more so that the personnel committee can follow up on any requests that the board has of the director during that time, and that'll be a regular item when we do have a meeting. And then the committee did meet in closed session to discuss personnel matters relating to the 2019 director's evaluation, and that meeting was productive, and we were able to finalize the evaluation, and we agreed to present the results in a proposed letter at this meeting, which we'll do so later tonight. And then we also did some housekeeping issues with our meeting schedule and how we're going to move forward for 2021 here. So to reiterate, our next meeting is on January 25th at 3 p.m. Where we'll be meeting with council chairs and dealing with the 2020 evaluation. Standard questions.
Any questions for Member Olivas? Yes, Member Galloway.
Not so much a question, just a thank you, Eric. It is obvious that you and your committee have been doing a tremendous amount of work playing catch up for 2019 and then taking care of 2020 as well. So I appreciate all of that to you and to all of you.
Thank you.
Well, given that you're the only non-committee member here and you're thanking us, we appreciate it. All right, so if there's no other questions for Member Olivas, we are at item 11, discussion and possible action. So, yes, Member Galloway.
Can we take a break? I know it's only been an hour and a half, but this seems like a natural place before we begin conversations.
Yes, we can take a break. Seeing no objection, I'll call for what? How about a 12-minute break? Back at 6:40.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. Hey, we gotta go outside.
So this is the, we're back from break. It's the meeting of the Board of the Civilian Police Oversight Agency, and we are at item 11 on the agenda, which is discussion and possible action items. Item A is the ad hoc working group, which was created a couple of meetings ago, and I'd just like to get a status report on that committee, whether they've met or not, and what we should plan for the future to put on the agenda of this group. So, is there a member of the committee present who can represent what's happening with that group?
Chair Cass, I'd like to request that we remove this item from the agenda going forward. I think that we've really struggled to get traction on this. As you know, the board just has so many competing demands, and not to say that this isn't an important one. But frankly, I put a lot of energy into this, and it was shot down by the board and sent to this committee. The committee's never had full buy-in. One of the members has never attended, and I think only emailed back and forth with us once. Member Galloway and I have tried to meet, and we have, but I think that really just given all the other competing demands that we have, this is they're just to ask two members to carry this big of a load is quite a bit, and so I think that we should remove this from the agenda going forward, and hopefully it's something that members can pursue individually on their own.
So would you offer a motion to withdraw this from the agenda, withdraw this, and then we will not have...
Yes, I'd offer a motion to withdraw this item from the agenda and going forward as well.
Second?
I'll second it.
Discussion? Seeing no discussion, I'll take a roll call vote in favor of the motion to withdraw this item from the agenda in the future. So Member Galloway,
Yes.
Member Mitchell,
Yes.
Member Olivas,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So it's passed unanimously to withdraw this item from the agenda. Moving on to item B, CPOA board changes to the CASA. This is a task that the board assigned to the Policy and Procedures Subcommittee, and we have received no suggestions from the board as to which CASA paragraphs they would be interested in, individual members would be interested in pursuing. And in addition to that, this has kind of lost momentum. I think it was initiated primarily by APD a couple of months ago. Priorities have changed, and again, this is also something that I think should be withdrawn from the agenda until conditions change again, and there's some reason to make these changes or a suggestion, an offer from APD to carry changes forward. So I would move that we withdraw this item from the agenda as well. And
Second.
So is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, we call for a vote. Member Galloway, in favor of removing this item from the agenda.
Yes.
Member Mitchell.
Yes.
Member Nixon, or Member Olivas.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So this is approved unanimously to withdraw this item from the agenda. So item C is board member reviews. This is something that we have in our policies and procedures. It was adopted as part of our conduct and ethics policy changes, and I'm trying to get that started. I've been reminded that it's been a while. It's been on the books. I don't think we have to wait for City Council to approve any changes we've made. I think the changes that we've made have been sent to City Council for their information. But there's no reason why we can't go forward with this, and so I'm trying to initiate the process. I've asked Member Mitchell if he would be the first person to try this process out, since we haven't done this before, and he's agreed that he will be the guinea pig. And so what my plan is that I will send out the information that is called for in the policies and procedures, which is, Director Harness collects the training information for members, and it's that training information template that he can forward to the member who's about to be under review. So I'll also put together some kind of a worksheet so that we've got a script or an agenda to follow when we do this, and we can try to keep it on track. And I'll do that before the meeting. And if Member Mitchell will bear with me, we'll try to work through how to get that, and then hopefully the first go around we'll get some positive suggestions. So the way that we have decided we do this according to our own policies and procedures is for the chair, the board member, and the director to meet and have a discussion of the members' performance, members' training, and review that, and try to have this answer, be helpful in this the idea is to be helpful, I think, and so that's the approach that we're taking. So I'm just, alerting the board that this process will be started. I'll try to push it through because I think this is, I know that this also, we've written into the policies and procedures that there's then be an annual review, which is led by the chair of the board member accomplishments, I guess, or the board accomplishments or progress for the year. So that, in order to do that on a timely basis, we need to get through the reviews first and then decide how we're going to get, the board together for their own, self evaluation, I guess is the one way to put it. So that just is to bring you up to date on the process. I don't know that it requires any board action at this point. It's just an alert that I'll be beginning the process. So Member Galloway.
For us having any discussion as to how the chair of the board has their review done as well. If the chair and the executive director meet with the board member, who would meet with the chair? Would it then be the vice chair of the board?
I think that was the gist of the discussion we had at some point, but I guess it's, it seems to me that by default that would be the most, straightforward way to do it. I mean, given that it's a small board and it's even smaller than it should be, then we don't have a lot of options here. So that, unless there's some objection, I would think that's the way we would proceed.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I think that makes sense. And if we didn't put that anywhere, we probably should,
Right.
just for perpetuity. But
I'll ask council to weigh in on this, and she has something that she'd like to offer.
Chair Dr. Cass, Member Galloway, you have contemplated the idea that the chairperson or a designee would participate in the review process. And so that designee likely would be the vice chair, but you all are free, or the chairperson at least at the time is free to designate someone else for that purpose.
thank you.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, I will try to contact Member Mitchell starting next week, and we'll try to set up some kind of a Zoom meeting among the three of us. So moving on to item D, which is the monitor's request for NACOL report. This was sent out, I believe, in probably about mid-November with a deadline of mid-December to give a report that the monitor is requesting to assess the board's training especially with respect to NACOL. And this is again just a reminder. I think this is an important piece of information that that keeps us in compliance essentially with our mission, and we are under review by the monitor. And given that we've been down this path before, where we've been sanctioned or at least called out by the monitor, I think it's in our best interest and everyone's to do this. So I can't other than saying that this is it really gets at the heart of what we're supposed to be doing. I think it's important that we get on the record and make it known what it is that the board individually, what board members have done in terms of learning about oversight, especially at NACOL. Now, I know Member Mitchell was exempted from this, so this doesn't the same argument doesn't apply to you. I won't belabor that point. So, but
can you just briefly tell me what is the requirement under the CASA?
Well, I believe I'd asked Director Harness. I believe he received information from the monitor as to exactly what they wanted.
Chair Dr. Cass, Member Mitchell, yes, it's been an issue for probably about a year and a half or so because the monitor wants some sort of matrix to evaluate the training that the board attends, board and agency members. And because there is no testing component related to NACOL, what the compromise was to have the attendees write an essay regarding their experience at NACOL and then any particular training modules that they attended. This was done this agreement was reached prior to COVID, but since NACOL was done completely online through webinars that were made available, an essay with answering a couple of questions based upon those webinars that were attended is the matrix that the monitor is willing to accept for the training component as it relates to NACOL. This is something for all of the training, not just specific to NACOL. So for instance, the DAGL training, which the investigators are going to be attending over the next 6 to 8 weeks, actually has a testing component that we can show the monitor for the training and the learning experience. So we don't have to worry about doing that, but because it's NACOL doesn't have that, then this was the solution that was offered and accepted by the monitoring team.
Yeah, I would assume that's probably easier when they actually have a conference, right?
Chair Dr. Cass, Member Mitchell, actually, I think this one might be a little easier because the webinars were once a week for a couple of hours, and you could pick and choose when you saw them. You didn't have to attend them live. They were available, or they are available still. So it was much more flexible. Not nearly as much fun as actually going to a conference and meeting other oversight professionals and getting to do that networking, obviously. But the information was there. There were some really good sessions. And I have, the staff has had to perform the same exercise for the NACOL attendance, and I have their work.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments regarding this item?
Sure,
Yes,
Cass.
Member Olivas.
So I've been reviewing our policies and procedures as far as this goes, as well as the ordinance, and for that matter, the CASA. And this is not required in any of these documents. And to me, it's a little bit disingenuous, I think, of the DOJ to come in and mandate that our volunteer board members devote more of their volunteer time to essentially prove that they went to training or that they were affected by training. And I think that this is something that we've seen periodically in this process. But I think that this is, well, for one, it's an unfunded mandate, which this whole thing is, and we all agree to that to some extent, that we're willing to participate and volunteer our time. But this is yet another unfunded mandate that's being forced upon us that I can find no letter of the law that actually says that this needs to be done or that board members are to do this, or for that matter, agency staff. And I think there's also sort of a philosophical question here, which is, what are we gaining by this? I guess, it is important to reflect on training. It is important to reflect on learning, but I think that forcing an all volunteer board to devote more of their time to doing that may not be the best way to actually improve the board and the board's performance. I think a much more useful act might be the item that we just discussed right before this, actually having member reviews and looking through members' attendance profiles and training records and that sort of thing. So I'm happy to participate in this and do this, I guess, reluctantly. But I really think that the board here is setting a precedent of ceding its authority and its independence by saying we will allow this to be decreed on us where it is not in any form or fashion written into law or ordinance or statute or settlement. And I think that, you know, this doesn't help us. This only further divides our time and reduces the amount of time that we have to spend on important issues, like, for example, the ad hoc subcommittee that we just essentially disbanded because we don't have time to do that. So I have a bit of an objection to this.
So I would ask our counsel to, if she can give us any perspective from the monitor's position. I think I would make the distinction between the DOJ and the monitor in this case. Now, I mean, you know, there's obviously a relationship, but it's the monitor team who's making this request.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. Yeah, the monitor.
Yeah, but member or Council Gooch, do you have anything you'd like to say in relation to this subject?
Thank you, Chair Dr. Cass, Member Olivas. Thank you for clarifying that this is coming from the IMR team. This is not coming from DOJ. Aside from that, the only other question that I have that maybe Director Harness might be able to enlighten me on is, I thought that IMR 11 indicated that this was a training requirement for agency staff, and then somehow it in IMR 12 turned into both the board and the agency. I believe that if this is something the board wants to discuss, excuse me, with the IMR team, that they would be open to that. So if this is a dialogue that the board would like to have for clarification or confirmation, if you will, I don't think that would be a problem to get coordinated.
Thank you. Well, with that, I mean, I accept, you know, your input, Member Olivas, and I believe that, you know, at this point, this is an individual choice of each board member to whether, you know, how to comply with this request, and I believe it is a request, you know. So, I mean, it's, you know, it's up to you, I believe, to decide how to you know, acknowledge this, and you know, I you know, accept your comments, whether, you know, in good faith. So my intent with this item was to remind the board that this was a request from the monitor. So Director Harness, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair Dr. Cass. The requirement for a matrix or a measurement for training is across the board for all training. So you'll recall when we did the use of force training with the Force Division, there was a pre-test and then there was a post-test. That was because of the monitoring team requiring a measuring matrix. So it's not solely NACOL. It's all the training across the board for agency and for board members. So I had to submit the testing for the use of force training for the board to be in compliance.
Member Olivas.
No, I appreciate that, Director Harness, and I'm not in any way, you know, faulting the agency for this. You know, you're trying to do the best you can to comply with what you're being told or what you're being given. So, you know, I understand that, and I very likely will help with this, at least in the short term. But I think that in the longer term to medium term, I think that as Council Gooch suggested, I think having a conversation about this is potentially meaningful because, you know, I think it's one thing for paid staff and certainly for APD to, you know, show proof that their training is effective, or to show those sorts of things. But it's sort of like if the DOJ wants to get involved in this and support the board and ensure that the board is receiving good training and being able to advance its mission and improve its members, at this point, I've got to say, I think the most important thing that we need, and this is the first time I've ever called for this, but I'm becoming increasingly aware that I think this is a problem. this is a completely volunteer board, and it takes a tremendous, colossal amount of time. And that places a very big filter on who is willing and able to serve on this board. It is not, I'm not saying, I mean this in no offense to anyone that's on the board currently or in the past, but it is not reflective of the Albuquerque community. I believe in part for that very reason, that this is a big ask of members for their time for this uncompensated position. And if the DOJ really wants to get involved and help improve the board, I think that's the first thing they could look to address. And that would require working with city council or the mayoral administration. I realize that, but I think that just placing more demands on members very limited time, I think actually stands to perhaps decrease the effectiveness of the board, because we're now, I only have so many hours in a week that I can devote to this. So now it's sort of, well, where do I cut hours from my board time to do this assignment? Or do I not do that? And so there's just a limited amount of time in the day for many of us, maybe not for all of us, but that's my piece. I would like to see what we can do to advance that conversation and have a conversation with the monitor. I'm sorry if I misspoke and said DOJ again.
All right. Any other comments before we move on? So seeing no other comments, we will. That was a reminder, and we'll move on to item E, which is Robert Rules of Order training. This is another requirement that the board placed on itself to have annual Robert Rules of Order training, and we are overdue. I think it was about a year ago in October that we had our last training, if I remember correctly. So that I can ask for Director Harness to give a report, because we've had a discussion about this, if he can bring us up to date as to where we stand on organizing that training.
Yes, Chair Dr. Cass, you're correct. It was something the board voted to place upon itself as a requirement. So the last time that we had the Robert's Rules of Order training, it was through city legal contracting with the parliamentarian to provide that training for all of the boards and commissions. I reached out to City Attorney Aguilar, and he informed me that they did not renew the contract with the parliamentarian. So we will have to independently procure a contract with the parliamentarian for your training. So we will set about doing that.
Is that something we really need? I mean, it seems to me that we're pretty compliant with the Robert's Rules of Orders at all the meetings I've been to. I'm not sure what added value there is, and if it is necessary, is it possible to just do a webinar? There's got to be some webinars out there already around this.
Any other comments? Yes, Member Olivas.
So a couple of things. This is in our policies and procedures, and by that means that we are supposed to do it. I think if we want to change that, then we should entertain a motion to do that, and then deliberate and have a debate on that, and potentially do that. But as it stands, I think that's what we, as a board, decided to write into our law, so to speak. I think to Member Mitchell's point, or perhaps to counterpoint that, I learned a lot from the last Robert's Rules of Order training, and I would say that we use very little of Robert's Rules of Order, actually, or in a very minimal amount. And I think there was a lot of strategies that were presented at that training that could have, had they been implemented across the board and adopted by all members, could have led to some streamlining of our operations and how quickly we can flow through meetings and move through agendas. And I think it could be very useful. I'm not opposed to the idea though of a webinar, obviously, or some hybrid form, which obviously is probably necessary anyway in the pandemic situation. But one of the items I wanted to bring up for Director Harness as you look to procure this, the parliamentarian at that last training had indicated that he felt the next step for the board would be for him to be invited to observe a meeting so that he could tailor a training to our specific meetings. I think the training he did was fairly general. I think he had, watched a meeting or something like that. But I think with more specificity to our meetings specifically would be appreciated by me at least. So that's my piece. I think it's a good idea. I hope that we can do that in some form or fashion in the near future.
Chair Dr. Cass, Member Olivas, we can certainly incorporate that as, especially given the fact that he could watch any of our meetings on YouTube at this point. He could observe that meeting prior to the next training. He also offered to sit in on a meeting and help guide the meeting as a part of the training as well. So if he has, I don't know if he has an A menu, a B menu, and a C menu, or however he breaks it out. If that happens to be available, I can certainly present that to you for your decisions and how you want to proceed.
Yes, Council Gooch.
I just want to add that I would like to speak with him as we go, because your rules and your policies and procedures have a hierarchy. And those are that anything not covered by your policies and procedures defaults to Robert's Rules of Order. And so it's just important, I think, for everyone that the hierarchy there is well maintained for purposes of, one, helping out Ms. Barella for her record keeping, and two, keeping the meetings flowing. So I just mention it because it is a bit of a quirk that we would want our parliamentarian that's doing the training to know.
So I think we can, I would like to give Member Mitchell an opportunity if he wants to propose that we remove Robert Rules training and make a motion to that effect. This would be the time to do it. If not, then
no, I don't feel that strongly about it. If other members think it's useful, I guess the upside is we get training hours with the monitor.
Well, okay, so in my view, the default is that it is in our policies and procedures. We are in the process of trying to schedule this. This was, for the purpose of informing the board that we're doing this and to sort of alert you. I think that given some comments earlier, actually, in this time of COVID, Zoom meetings make it easier to get this kind of training. It's exactly whatever the meeting time is out of your day, rather than including travel time. So with that, I would say that the discussion is over. I mean, we're in agreement that we're going to proceed with this, and so I would, unless there's any other comment, I would ask that Director Harness continue to work through the process of getting this set up. So, Member Galloway.
So not to derail that at all, I think that is what it is for now, but maybe we consider doing this every other year rather than every year, if it's written into our bylaws to do it that way, just because we only have 12 meetings a year. It may be a little much to do it once a year, but just something to consider, and if anybody wants to place that on the agenda next month.
All right, if there's no further discussion, we'll close out that item, and we will move on to item 12, which is meeting with council regarding pending litigation matters. So, or I'm sorry, personnel issues. So I need a motion to move into closed session to discuss limited personnel matters pursuant to NMSA 1978-sections 10-15-1H2. So could I have a motion to move into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
And roll call vote. All in favor of moving to closed session? Member Galloway,
Yes.
Member Mitchell,
Yes.
Member Olivas,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So we will move into closed session by joining the room 1. So we are returning from closed session that discussed limited personnel issues. So I will need a roll call vote to return from closed session. So Member Galloway, in favor of returning to open session.
Yes.
Member Mitchell,
Yes.
Member Olivas,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So we were returning from a closed session at which we discussed only limited personnel matters pursuant to NMSA 1978, Section 10-15-1H2. So we are now back in open session, and I would.
Chair Cass, I'd like to make a motion.
All right, Member Olivas.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 2 letters that were discussed in closed session. One letter was drafted per City Ordinance 9-4-1-7C. This will be to summarize a letter sent to parties noted in this ordinance referenced in regards to the Executive Director's 2019 evaluation. And the second letter will be a letter to the Director for the Director's individual personnel file from the board.
Second.
All right, so any discussion? Since this was discussed in closed session, I will call for a vote to accept the letters Member Olivas has moved. Member Galloway,
Yes.
Member Mitchell,
Yes.
Member Olivas,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So the letters moved by Member Olivas have been accepted. So we're having finished that item of business. We will now, I would entertain a motion to return to a closed session which limited pending litigation will be discussed, and this is also pursuant to the same New Mexico statute, I believe. Is that correct? Council Gooch?
That's correct, Chair Dr. Cass, except it's item section 7 of the statute as opposed to section 2.
As opposed to section which?
2.
2. Okay.
It's H2 was our first session, and this is H7 for this item.
We have a motion to we have a motion and second to return to closed session according to NMSA 1978 Section 10-15-1H7.
Dr. Cass, can you tell me who seconded that motion?
I don't think we moved it.
I'm sorry.
So I'll move it. Sorry.
All right. So Member Galloway has moved that we return to closed section pursuant to NMSA 1978 Section 10-15-1H7. Do we have a second?
Second.
In favor of returning to closed session, Member Galloway,
Yes.
Member Mitchell,
Yes.
Member Olivas,
Yes.
and chair votes yes. So we're going to go back into closed session. So, and for GovTV, we expect this to be a short session as well. So this is the CPOA board returning from second closed session, and I will ask for a motion to return to open session.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, so roll call vote to return to open session. Member Galloway,
Yes.
Member Mitchell,
Yes.
Member Olivas,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So we're returning to open session. We're coming out of closed session at which, for the purpose of discussion of pending litigation, and we now, and nothing but pending litigation was discussed, and we're returning to open session consistent with NMSA 1978, Section 1015 1H7. So we are back in open session, and we have, I'm not sure that there's, I would defer to Council Gooch as to any closing remarks that might be necessary here. Just ask you to close this out if we need to.
Thank you, Chair Dr. Cass. No, there's nothing else to add. I think we can move to the next agenda item.
All right, so other business. We're at agenda item 13, which is other business. Is there any other business? All right, then I believe we're in a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
In favor of adjournment, Member Galloway,
Yes.
Member Mitchell,
Yes.
Member Olivas,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So we are adjourned. It's a new record.
Yeah, I love it.
Night all.
Just for you.
Good night. See?